accept that the power of these laws is used to set free the natural life, so it can picture the perfect vision of Christ for my own life, for all people, and for the planet. In the name I am that I am, it is done. Amen.
That was beautiful. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. It's wonderful to feel. Here we are a group. We've never been together before as a group. But it's like there comes this flow of, we could just feel that everybody was in unison, you know. And that's just a wonderful feeling, I think. And I also felt that, especially in the end, it was like, you got this sense of this, how the light of God is just this irresistible force. And it's just like, the masters are so anxious, so eager, so loving, they just want to release all this light. But they, of course, have to respect the law of free will. So it's like when you make yourself the open door for it, you can really feel that, you can sense that force. And I just think it's a beautiful feeling. So we'll now have a dictation, not by Mother Mary, incidentally, if you respect that. I am the Archeia Charity. I am the Archeia of the third ray of love. God love, unconditional love, formless love, the love that flows and raises up all life without seeking to possess. For how do you possess? By holding things back from transcending themselves, by holding people back from transcending themselves, so you can keep them in the matrix where you feel comfortable. Is this not what you have seen time and time again on the European continent, where there has been in every society, in every epoch, in every time period, a power elite that wants to hold back the people from transcending themselves? Is this not the very core of the manifestation of anti-love? You do not want the people to be free. You do not want them to flow with the upward movement of the Spirit that pulls the entire universe up higher. You will not let them flow with that, for you have separated yourself, not you, but you, the power elite, have separated yourself from that flow. And you want others to validate your choice to set yourself apart. You have a right to set yourself apart, but you do not have a right to demand that other people should validate your choice and make themselves the slaves of your choice. This is not a right given to you by the law of free will, and thus you cannot take this without taking it by force, deceit, and manipulation. And so you see how this power elite, how the members of it have used all kinds of ideas, many of them originating on the European continent, in order to manipulate people into not flowing with the river of life, with the upward movement of life, that truly is love. When you truly love, do you not want your beloved to become more? Surely you do. So, when you see that individuals want to limit others, be it their spouses, their children, their parents, their significant others, you know they are not coming from divine love. What could you possibly lose by your partner transcending himself or herself and becoming more in the flow of the Spirit? You can lose nothing. Your ego can lose everything. It can lose its sense of being in control, which of course is what the ego needs, for it thinks it will die if it is not in control. Now we have told you that there is a power elite, there is a group of beings who have separated themselves from the flow of the river of life, and they have been allowed to embody on earth. Surely many people will ask, Why was this allowed? Why did they come here? Well, they came here, as we have said, as substitute teachers. When the people had separated themselves from the flow of love, they were trying to make things stand still. You understand, my beloved? Before the fallen beings were allowed to embody in this planet, you did not see many of the wars and conflicts that you see today. But what you saw was still stand. So many societies on this earth were standing still. They had reached a level, it was not primitive. It was in many ways sophisticated compared to the civilizations you see on earth today. The people were satisfied. They were complacent. They felt they had enough. It was so good what they had. But instead of being willing to transcend it and we have more, they became attached to what they had. They wanted to stop the clock. They wanted to stop the forward progression of life. They wanted to hold on to it longer, just a little bit longer, just till the end of this lifetime, which, by the way, at the time was longer than the average lifespan today. And so it became clear that the only thing that could shake them out of this, for they would not listen to spirit anymore, was to allow some beings to embody on earth who could create such conflicts that the people would realize that still stand does not work, because there really is no standing still. As we have explained about the second law of thermodynamics, that any closed system will start breaking down and self-destructing. But this was what the inhabitants of the earth had not realized, would not realize, and so the fallen beings were allowed to embody here so they could outplay their consciousness. It was, of course, inevitable that they would drag many people among the original inhabitants into their conflicts and their wars. It was inevitable that this would create suffering. But the thing is, when people close themselves off to the input from spirit, from the ascended masters, how will they grow unless they see the physical octave outplay in an extreme form the divisions and the conflicts they have in their own consciousness? The stark reality is that they cannot grow in any other way than through the school of hard knocks. And therefore, it was necessary to have someone who could make the knocks harder. For the people at the time had isolated and insulated themselves to some degree from the hard knocks that their own consciousness had created. So it was necessary to allow this to be outplayed. This gave everyone an opportunity. It gave the inhabitants of earth an opportunity to see that the immovable, the still stand, the consciousness that was not transcending itself did not work. And it gave the fallen beings another opportunity to come to a planet and see the contrast between their own warring and conflict and the relative harmony that was on earth at the time. They had the potential to be transformed by this. Some were indeed transformed by it, but as you clearly see, not all were transformed by it. And so, what you realize, I hope, is that cycles have now turned to the point where those who are the most extreme among the war makers on earth are, by cosmic law, no longer needed here. The earth has moved to a point, the collective consciousness has moved to a point where a critical mass of people have seen the fallacy of war. And therefore, it is a potential that these warring life streams who will not be transformed, who will not give up their war, can be removed from the earth. But for that to happen, a critical mass among the spiritual people must not only see the fallacy of war and the unpleasantness of war and the futility of war, they must also transcend in themselves the very consciousness that generates war. And this is indeed what you who are here have started doing. Many of you have completely transcended that consciousness. And therefore, we can indeed use you, your chakras, your auras during this conference to release a certain amount of light that will then bring the judgment of those beings who will not let go of their warring ways. And you understand, as we have explained most recently by Mother Mary in her discourses on war, that the judgment is not some ominous thing. It is actually an opportunity where those who are stuck in a certain state of consciousness are exposed to enough light and they cannot ignore or deny it. Therefore, they see that there is something beyond their state of consciousness, and thereby they have a choice that they did not have before when they were completely blinded by the separate state of consciousness. They can now choose between the light and the darkness. And therefore, the judgment is truly a supreme opportunity. And those who will not choose the light, who will not be transformed, will then be taken somewhere else where they can receive another opportunity, depending on their level of consciousness. So, you are not in any way harming the fallen beings by calling forth their judgment. You are actually giving them an opportunity to get out of the state of consciousness they are in, a state which causes them constant suffering, even though they sometimes ignore the suffering and cover it over by this sense of power that makes them almost drunk, feeling like they are masters of the universe. Now, as we have already said this morning, those who are embodied or in other ways attached to a low planet like Earth surely cannot be sophisticated fallen beings, or they would not have manifested what you see manifest on this planet. So they are not as high and mighty as they think. They are just so trapped in that state of consciousness that they cannot see anything else. So again, the judgment is an opportunity. You are not judging. We are not asking you to judge anyone. We are asking you to call forth the judgment of Christ, which will discern between what is real and unreal without applying any kind of value judgment. You have given a magnificent service today, both earlier and this evening, by giving this invocation for consuming the records of war. This is again having a double effect. It is giving those who have perpetrated these wars an opportunity to choose an alternative, but it is also giving the people an opportunity to choose not to follow along on these war makers who have dragged the people into war after war after war on this European continent. When you come home, look up on the internet and search on wars in Europe and see how long the list is, going back thousands of years. You do not need to dwell on them, but I want you to know and realize with a conscious mind how many wars there have been on this continent, so that you can have that impetus to look at this long line of wars and ask yourself a simple question. Have you had enough? Do you feel this is enough of wars on this European continent? Has enough blood soaked into the ground on this continent that you can stand up and say, I will not accept any more wars in Europe? And then you make that determination, not with the outer mind. I'm not asking you to force your outer mind or to mechanically make this statement, but I'm asking you to tune into your heart and reconnect to the love that brought you into embodiment at this time. If you have embodied on the European continent today, and you are a spiritual person, certainly a person open to Ascended Master teachings, it was most likely because you have such a love for Saint Germain and a manifestation of his golden age that you wanted to be here to help bring an end to war, which truly has been such a burden on this continent. And so I ask you to reconnect to that love, and to not force yourself to make the calls about war, but to do it with love, to do it out of love, to be motivated by love, not by anger, my beloved. I do not need you to be angry with those who perpetrate war after war. I do not need you to look back at some of the wars or atrocities that have happened and be angry with these people, or even with the dark forces. I ask you to do what very, very few people are able to do, to look at war with love. I'm not asking you to love war. I'm asking you to look at it from a state of love. This will require some adjustment. If you are sensitive, you can feel that there is a reaction from you. It is not only a reaction of you personally, it is a reaction from the collective consciousness as I speak these words in the physical. There is an objection, there is a protest that surely one cannot find anything loving about war. One cannot look at it with love. But you can, my beloved. It is possible, because if you do not look at it with love, what are you looking at it with? You are looking at it with fear or anger. What is it that reinforces the momentum of war? What is it that so often causes people to feel that they have to go to war, they have no other choice? Is it not fear and anger and hatred? So, if you hate war, will you not reinforce the very consciousness and the energetic momentums that cause war after war? So how will you be a peacemaker? How will you play a role in removing war from earth? Well, only when you can look at war with love. I know this will require an adjustment from you. But have we not already in previous dictations during this conference asked you to make an adjustment, to adjust your vision, to not look at us through the images of the fallen beings. I am now asking you to not look at war through the images of the fallen beings. They want you to think that war is inevitable, that war is beneficial, that there is something to be gained from war. They want you to think you can only look at it with negative feelings, that you cannot look at it with love. They want you to think that you cannot free yourself from the consciousness of war, the consciousness of anti-love. But you can, my beloved. You can indeed. I give you permission to do this. I am the Archeia of the third way of love. I can give you the permission to look at war with love, through the eyes of love. And then you see that no matter how extreme of a manifestation war is, it is an outplaying of free will and people's state of consciousness. It is making visible, undeniable at the physical level that which is in the consciousness at the three higher levels. Thereby you see that as extreme as war is, it is still possible for people to learn a positive lesson from war. I grant you that we would all like people to learn this without experiencing these extreme manifestations. But given that they cannot learn it in a higher way, they can still learn it through the physical outpicturing of their state of consciousness. And this is what you realize when you are in love, when you are looking at war through the eyes of love. You're not loving war, but you are loving the people. You are loving them freely by holding the image that they can transcend, that they can rise above it, that they can free themselves from it. And when you look at people with love, you do not need to punish other people. You do not need to make them feel bad about what they did in the past. My beloved, before you can transcend a certain state of consciousness, it is necessary to see the unreality of that state of consciousness. But it is not necessary to feel bad or guilty about what you have done in the past. In fact, this does not help you transcend the dualistic consciousness. It only ping-pongs you from one extreme, now of not seeing what you are doing, to the other dualistic extreme of now feeling guilty for what you did. Do you understand that the fallen beings want you to be in this consciousness where you look at some people who created war and you feel that they should be made to feel responsible and realize the full manifestation and problem with what they did. And so you want them to feel bad, to feel guilty. Think about the big country next to the little country you are in, and how many of the nations in Europe have wanted to hold the German people responsible for World War II and Nazism. It is not that they were not responsible, but as we have said before, World War II was not only an expression of the consciousness of the German people, but of all of the people in Europe and even the United States and beyond. You cannot look at World War II and think that you will move the planet forward by making the German people feel bad and feel like they can never rise beyond what was done in the past. You cannot create a more peaceful Europe by wanting to punish the German people for what was done in the past. You can only make a more peaceful Europe by helping the German people transcend the consciousness they had before and during the war. And how will you help them transcend their consciousness? By you transcending the consciousness that you had, that your country, that your people had before and during the war. You see, this is looking through the eyes of love. There is no need to punish, to blame, to make other people feel bad. There is a need to make them feel free. And yes, they need to see what they did, but they do not need to see it through the dualistic vision of the fallen beings. They do not need to feel bad and be punished. They need to be liberated. They need to be set free. This is what love wants. This is what love does. It frees everyone from whatever limitations they are trapped in. You may think that after something as terrible as the Second World War and the Holocaust, people could never be free of this. This is what the fallen beings want you to believe. Something had happened in the past that will define you for all of the future. As we have said now several times, what do the Ascended Masters want? We want you to know that there is absolutely nothing that could ever happen on earth that you cannot transcend by making new choices. And when you are in love, you can choose to let go of the old, to transcend the old. This is a choice you cannot make when you are in fear, because you will be afraid of losing something. As Master Moore so eloquently said this morning, you have a wound, and in order to avoid re-experiencing the feeling you had, you're doing everything possible to avoid going into it. You are looking outside yourself and projecting that the problem is out there, that it is these other people that need to change. Certainly there is a reason why Nazism emerged in Germany and not some other nation. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't a dualistic aspect of the consciousness of France and England and other nations. So, do we actually advance the evolution of Europe by making the Germans exclusively responsible for the Second World War? Or do we awaken to the fact that all countries of Europe had a responsibility for this event? That all countries co-created this, and that therefore every country has something that they need to transcend. And as Jesus said, once you pull that beam from your own eye, then you can see clearly how to help your brother pull the splinter from his or her eye. But until you have pulled it from your own eye, you will not be able to see it clearly. For you are again blinded by your own wound of what you will not look at in yourself. And therefore you often will not see that the very problem you claim to see in others is actually an illustration of what you have not been willing to see in yourself. And this goes for nations as well. It is not healthy that so many countries are projecting that Nazism or another totalitarian force could never have arisen in their country. For all countries in Europe are to some degree affected by the same consciousness. This continent is not so big that you can separate one part clearly from another. What is it that will pull Europe up to the next level of evolution? It is a greater degree of oneness and harmony. What is the great victory that you achieved here today with your cause? It was to come into unison, into harmony, so that despite the fact that you do not know each other personally, many of you, that you have just come together in this group for the first time, you could still achieve that greater harmony that can only come from love. It cannot be forced, my beloved. Surely you realize this. And so you cannot force Europe to come into unison. Was that not what Hitler attempted to do? Was it not what Napoleon attempted to do? Was it not what the Soviets attempted to do? To force union through sameness. This is the only way that the fallen beings can envision this. You have to destroy differences. Then they think there will be union. But there will be union not through force but through love only. It can be no other way, because only love can recognize the oneness of all life. And what can bring union except a recognition that all life is one? Nothing else, my beloved. That is love. Seeing the oneness of all life, regardless of the manifestations that you see with the physical senses on earth. Seeing beyond even war, even the Second World War, with all of its suffering. Seeing beyond it to see that this is just an outer manifestation that is not real. And beyond it is still the oneness of all life. This is love. When you can, as was said earlier, love your enemy because you see that that enemy is also an expression of the one mind, the one life. Then you have transcended separation. Then you are in love. Then you are a force for love. And so, I wish to congratulate you for coming together. For coming together in that spirit of harmony, oneness, and unison. I wish you to extend this unison, not only amongst yourselves horizontally, but also vertically with us, as we have made an effort to break down this barrier or distance that you tend to see between you and us. Allow us to step through the veil in your hearts. Allow yourselves and each other to be who you are. As Mother Mary said on the first day, give yourself permission to love yourself. You might repeat this sentence or put it in your own words. Give yourself permission to love yourself. Surely, I do love you. But for many of you, saying it will just be words that you have heard before. And many of you may have heard them from people who wanted to control you. Because so many people think that when you say, I love you to another human being, that person is supposed to give you some ownership. And you are suddenly entitled to something because you have said that you love that person. This is not how I say it. I do not desire to own you. How could I possibly be threatened by you exercising the free will given to you by God? I know that I have won my ascension by exercising my free will. And I know that you will eventually win yours by exercising your free will. Because it cannot be any other way that there will come a point where you begin to see, where all people begin to see what we have explained to you. How it is your own choices that manifest the physical conditions you face, and how you can transcend any previous choice by making a higher choice. So I thank you from the bottom, from the core of my being, for coming together and being here in this union of hearts that can only